Hey, everybody. So excited for this episode with my buddy, Bruce Irving. And you are going to just love it because you're never going to believe how someone can go from owning pizza shops to running a full-fledged marketing firm just by providing value-added content to that specific niche. And that's exactly what you're going to learn in this episode. Also, don't forget, we are about 10 days away 10 days away from our next LinkedIn intensive. It's a free 5-day intensive that Nancy and I do. It's from May 24th to May 28th. The link to register is in the description of this episode. So we hope to see you there and enjoy the episode. Networking and marketing made simple is for you, the business owner who has a product, a service, or a message that you believe in. My name is Scott Aaron, and each week we'll take a behind-the-scenes look into the real-world marketing and networking tactics and strategies for getting what you have in front of you to a lot more people. Thanks for spending time with me, and now let's get started. So Bruce, welcome to today's episode, and super excited to have you here for a number of reasons. Number one, I love talking to other entrepreneurs, but also entrepreneurs that started with a traditional brick and mortar business like you and I had. Obviously, your brick and mortar business was built around serving people good pizza that would then come to my brick and mortar, which was a gym to work it off. So they kind of went hand in hand. And I also love how you made the transition like I did in moving from the brick and mortar to the online space where obviously so many doors and opportunities are provided to us. So number one, Bruce, welcome to the show. Number two, for the audience members that aren't familiar with you and what you do in your podcasts, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got in on this entrepreneurial journey.
Sure. Scott, first off, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I love talking business and about entrepreneurship. So back in 2000, I've been in the pizza industry my whole life. You know, I started there. I live in Boston, and Pizzeria Regina is a big pizzeria that people recognize from going to the North End if you've ever visited Boston or you live in the area. And I started working for them when I was 15. I love the business. I love making pizza. And I just kind of worked for them, learned the business. And then as I moved through my teenage years, I met up with a fella who ended up being my brother-in-law in the future and business partner. And we started to work together for 10 or 15 years. And then back in 2013, podcasting wasn't super popular in our area or our niche, but it started to gain exposure where you could go listen to podcasts and learn things. And especially for what I did, I worked in the restaurant. I wasn't just a business owner who sat behind a desk and did paperwork. That was what he did. I actually worked in the restaurant. So being able to listen to podcasts and learn while I worked was very valuable to me. And there wasn't any podcasts in my niche there was a couple in the restaurant industry, but it didn't really focus on what I wanted to learn. So I said, you know what I bet you if I started a podcast, I could talk to people who are in my area, restaurant, pizzerias, and pick their brain. At this point in time, we were trying to grow our business. We were trying to go from one location to two. And, as any other business owner, we were having a hard time finding employees and coming up with systems and maintaining sales and marketing. And there was always people out there who looked from the outside looking in, looked like they had it all figured out. So I said, you know what? I'm going to start a podcast and I'm going to invite those people on my podcast. And literally the only reason I started the podcast was to pick their brain for 30 or 45 minutes and get the opportunity to ask them questions that I wanted to ask from them that I probably wouldn't get the chance to ask them if I just sent them an email or a phone call. They would be like, get out of here. I don't have time for that. But with a platform like a podcast, I could do that. And I could also share what was working for us when it comes to marketing. We had a pretty successful pizzeria, and that's where it all started. And 300 and something episodes later, here we are.
Amazing. And I think, one of the main things that people do have to focus on is getting very, very specific with your niche. Everyone talks about casting this wide net in business and they think they're going to reel in everybody. And that's not how it goes. Now, there's a lot of opportunity out there for us to grow a business. But for me, I niche down with social media and focusing just on LinkedIn, even though I'm very omnipresent on Facebook and Instagram.
Right.
LinkedIn is my niche. That's what I teach. That's what I coach. It's what I speak on. It's what I train on. And that really puts you into this selective category where you do become that thought leader and that expert in that specific field. So let me ask you this, going back before we go forward, what do you feel were some of the best lessons that you learned in actually owning and operating a brick and mortar business that you were able to then translate into what you're doing now with an online business?
I feel like people are your biggest asset and your biggest liability, whether that's online or offline, especially when you run a brick and mortar location. You can't, the type of business that we ran, people were necessary. We couldn't automate too much. We needed a certain amount of people to run the business, and we needed a certain type of individual to help us run and grow that business. And the same with offline marketing. When you do online marketing, like when you do online marketing, you need people. You need people to listen to what you have to say. You need customers. You need to network with other people. So I think being able to communicate and being able to find people who can fit into what you're trying to do was probably the biggest lesson that I took away. And I was very not good at it in the beginning, especially with the brick and mortar. That was the thing that I struggled with the most, was trying to build that team and trying to find people. And that's one of the things when I started the podcast, I wanted to learn the most. Like, how do people find people, and how do they train people to see the vision of what you want to do in your business, and then get them to not necessarily like go along with you, but like buy into what you're saying. That was the hardest part for me. And that's literally why I started the podcast. I wanted to learn that the most. And it's still relevant to this day. That's still the number one question that I get asked, is how do you find people?
Yeah, T. Harv Eker actually says it best. He says, every master was once a disaster.
I'm
So
still a disaster.
yeah, I mean, we're all looking to improve in some way, shape, or form. And you know, the big thing for me is that sometimes the greatest businesses are created by accident, but really on purpose, because when you start to solve a problem or a pain point that a lot of people have, then you can create a successful business out of it. Just like you created this marketing podcast for pizzeria and restaurant owners, and you were giving all these marketing tips, and before you knew it, you had all these people reaching out to you. So at what point, when you started this podcast nearly 6.5, 7 years ago, did you realize that you actually had a new budding business on the horizon?
It probably wasn't until a couple of years in. It took a while because I was operating the pizzerias as I was doing the podcast in the beginning, and it just wasn't on my radar, and I wasn't looking to do that. But then there came a point in time where you're consistent with something for so long that you reach enough people where for me, it became, I had to make a decision. Do I continue to grow the pizzeria and do that, or do I take a chance with this new opportunity to start this new business and go that way? So for me, it was a couple years in where there was enough people messaging me or reaching out to us to say, hey, help us with our marketing, that we had to take a chance, right? And we had to make a decision. We can either get rid of all those people or not take them on as clients and continue to grow the pizzeria, or take a chance. I know I can go back and operate a pizzeria if I wanted to. It's very simple for me. Do I want to take a chance and try something new and see if this new venture works out? And if it does, see where it takes me? Or do I want to just not do that and continue the path I was going? And, at that point in my life, I was a little bit older. I was doing the pizzeria for a long time. It's not an easy business to do. It's very easy to get burnt out in. And it was a good decision for me because I wanted to take a break and be like, I'm going to try something new and see how it goes.
What do you feel was the biggest obstacle that you ended up facing going from the brick and mortar side of business to now the online marketing side of business?
I was in the pizzeria business my whole adult life, so I know it very, very well. So taking a leap of faith and saying, I'm going to start this new business that I didn't know a heck of a lot about, and I needed to learn new things. And the uncertainty of being an entrepreneur, whether you own a brick and mortar or you start a new business online, is always there. The difference for me was the cost of doing business with an online business was much less costly than it is to do an offline business. So it was like, you know what, as long as there's enough customers there and I continue to do the podcast, I think that we can make this thing work. So just having that leap of faith and saying, all right, you know what, you're going to try it out. And if it fails, it fails. And you have to be okay with if it fails, you saying it failed and going back to doing what you were doing before. And I'm totally fine with that.
Yeah, it's always good to have multiple eggs in your basket and a multiple skill set for that matter. And this being a marketing podcast where I always have people coming on talking about strategy, what do you feel was something that made you different, or maybe an approach that you had when it comes to marketing a business that had those people reaching out to you asking for help?
I mean, for me, it was easy because not a lot of restaurants or pizzerias were using social media back in 2015, 2014, 2016 when we were doing this podcast. Like now it's even still, it's 2020, 2021, and people still aren't really diving into social media or really fully believe that you could solely do that without having to buy menus or postcards or do direct mail. So back then it was really easy to stand out. I was the only podcast in the restaurant space talking about marketing, or especially in the pizzeria space, talking about how to use Facebook and how to use Facebook ads and this app called Instagram that nobody really knew about in 2015 in the restaurant space. Like they kind of knew about it, but they didn't really know about it. In Snapchat. So that was easy for me to stand out in that regard because there was just not a heck of a lot of other people talking about it.
What's your best piece of advice for now being in the quote unquote marketing game for 6-7 years now? What's your best piece of advice for someone that is looking to take their business online or has an online business and just doesn't know where to begin, is how to make themselves stand out? What's your best piece of advice to that person?
I tell everybody, and I know there's a lot of podcasts out there already, I tell everybody to start a podcast. Even if you get 0 listeners, the network that you can build by asking people to come on your podcast and talk to them is almost more valuable than the listeners of that podcast. So we have 2 podcasts now, and between the 2 podcasts, and we used to do a live show when Facebook Live first came out in like an app called Blab. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Blab, but we did a live show. But so between the 2 podcasts that I have and the live shows that we did, we've done over 500 episodes of the show. And of those 500, I've probably had 350 guests on. So that's 350 people that I've talked to for 45, 50 minutes, that of those 350, 325 I probably never would have talked to in my life. And I could reach out to someone if anybody has a question that I don't have the answer to, and I can refer them to them, or I could ask them a question. So for me, if you are looking to take your business to the next level, just start a podcast. And it doesn't have to be video because there's a lot of people who are shy on video. And the value of building that network, and it does take time, but if you do a podcast a week and talk to one new person every single week over the course of a year, 2 years, your network is going to expand so rapidly, and the people you know and can help you out, or will refer you people that you need, that you could help out, is so much value in that I tell everybody to start a podcast.
The best promotion that anyone can receive is the promotion of somebody else.
Right.
And that's why, like you, I've done close to 230 episodes of my podcast. It's eclipsed 100,000 downloads.
Fantastic.
Thank you. But also it's gotten me a lot of network growth, because every person that I bring on, I do 2 episodes a week. I do 1 solo and 1 interview. And the solo episodes, that's me continuing to build the know, like, and trust factor with my audience. The interview is me, number 1, introducing someone that I connected with to my audience to build the know, like, and trust, but for that person's network to be introduced to me as me interviewing that person. So it's really hard to explain the gravity and the massive exposure that a podcast gets you. But Bruce, the one thing, and I always tell people, there's 3 things that you need to do to stand out online: have a website, have a podcast, and have a blog. Because all of those things are searchable on Google, on Yahoo, on Bing, and that's how people to this day still go and find people. But the other thing is this: everyone says, you know what, Scott, I shouldn't have a podcast. I have nothing to talk about. I have nothing to say. Listen, everyone has a first episode of their podcast.
It's true.
I still haven't gone back to listen to it because I don't know how it's going to sound, because after 2 years of doing a podcast, obviously you get much better at it. But what I can tell you is that everyone has to start somewhere. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. If you really want to stand out and market yourself, have a podcast, because number one, that's how you can really build that trust with your network. But also it's a way for you to get plugged in to other people's networks. So with that being said, how important, obviously, you now have the 2 podcasts. How instrumental have those podcasts been for you, not only with the growth of your business, but with the growth of the networking that you're now doing?
It's been the most valuable thing that I've ever done for my network. It's probably been the number one factor when it comes to what I've done online. The podcasts have done everything. Like without the podcast, I'll give you a quick story. So there was another podcaster that I'm friends with. His name is Tyler Anderson. He has a podcast. It's called Casual Fridays Podcast. I reached out to him. This was a couple years ago, 3 years ago, maybe. And I said, hey, Tyler, I love your podcast. I do a pizza podcast. I know I got to explain to everybody what a pizza podcast is when I send them an email, because they're like, a pizza podcast? What are you doing? Want to come on my podcast and just talk about marketing? Let's just go over like the different platforms and talk. He came on my podcast. It was a great show. In turn, he's like, you know what? This is great. Why don't you come on my podcast and talk about, marketing for local businesses? So I'm like, no problem. I went on his podcast. Michael Stelzner, who is the founder of Social Media Examiner and does Social Media Marketing World, one of the biggest marketing conferences, listened to that podcast with me on it, emailed me and said, hey, I love you on Tyler's podcast. Do you want to come on my podcast? Now, his podcast is pretty big in the marketing space. I went on his podcast. That turned into me becoming a speaker at Social Media Marketing World for a couple years running now. So all because I started a podcast. I reached out to another podcaster, and I didn't care that my podcast was pizza related and his was marketing related, and didn't think twice about it or dwell on the fact that, oh, he's going to say no, or what if he doesn't want to come on my podcast? I took a shot, and that shot turned into me now becoming a speaker at Social Media Marketing World, which has been pretty good for my career in speaking over the last couple of years. So I think it's everything. I think podcasting is something that everybody should do. And one quick thing I would note about what you said was, look at your podcast as a way to build your network and not find listeners. I think too many people look at the number of listeners they have for each episode of the podcast. And then when they get to 10 or 15 or 20, when that newness starts to fade and it starts to become work, they're like, oh, only 100 people are listening to my podcast. I'm just going to shut it down. The value in doing your podcast is the catalog that you build up over time and the people that you have on your show. So don't look at it, even if you get 15 listens to your show, don't look at it as 15 people listening to my show. Think about it as the network you're building over time for your business.
So I saw this Instagram post. Brody Pearson, he's like an Instagram photographer, and he said, for all those people that are constantly comparing themselves and the engagement they're not getting, he said, look at things this way. He goes, every time you have 10 to 15 viewers looking at your stuff, you're filling a classroom in a high school. Every time you have 50 to 75 people viewing your stuff, you're filling part of a movie theater.
Right.
And every time you have 200, 300, 400 people viewing your stuff, you are filling an auditorium. And I love what you said there, because I still get excited. Like I remember when I launched my podcast and I said to my wife, I'm like, oh my God, 10 people listen to this episode. Holy shit. Like
Yeah.
and because you can't fathom that, like who the hell's going to listen to this? And now, just to give you an idea, the podcast is somewhere around 700 to 800 listeners per week now, which again, so eternally grateful for it. But not even that, when I check the analytics and I see that my podcast has been listened in 88 different countries around the world, you start understanding, you're like, wow, you know,
Yeah.
you want to talk about metrics and reach and visibility and rapport building. Podcasting is your own platform. It's where your own voice is. It's where you can talk about whatever you want to talk about. You can't say the wrong thing because it's your podcast. You can talk about whatever you want. And my wife and one of her really close friends, they have a podcast called Hey Girl Hey. And it's just two women talking about girl stuff.
Yeah.
You know, premenopause, postmenopause, raising kids, and like all girl stuff, which again, it's just two girls talking, and it's all about sharing experiences, but taking those experiences and sharing it with your listeners. One of my good friends, Emily Goff, she's a podcast coach. And she said to me when she came on my podcast, she goes, what people don't understand is podcasting is one of the most intimate experiences that someone can experience with you, because most people, obviously you and I work from home, but most people, if they're out there working, they're driving somewhere or they're listening in their house and it's in their ears, and you're actually in the most sacred space of someone, which is the 6 inches between their ears. You're sharing this experience with them, and that's where the magic happens. And again, I can't stress enough, and Bruce, I know you can as well, how important a podcast is. And for all the listeners, if you don't know what you want to talk about, do some research. Go to Apple Podcasts and listen to a bunch of different podcasts within genres that you like, and get some ideas. Take notes. See the cadence of how people do their episodes, and you can get some ideas for yours. So
Yeah.
Bruce, before we start to wind down, for the listeners here, 2020 was a really just weird year, and
That's
the
for sure.
best way to put it. And 2021 is starting off much like how 2020 ended. For the people that are still kind of struggling with pivoting in this environment, what's the one thing, or what helped you over the last year plus with what we've been facing with this pandemic that's really allowed your business to continue moving forward?
I think so especially being in the restaurant industry was hit pretty hard with the lockdowns in 2020. And, there was a lot of push from, I'd say for the last 5 years, the restaurant industry has been really slow at adapting technology. Like they knew it was there, but there wasn't any real push for them to adapt to that technology. And when this lockdown happened, there was a push. There was a 5-year push in 3 weeks to lock down that technology, whether it be online ordering or curbside pickup or how your website flows or how people can order from you. Like it made those people realize that like whatever you've been thinking about doing that maybe you thought you wanted to or should have done, you need to do now, because who knows what's going to happen. And that's what the lesson taught me. Like the things that I am grateful for is that I did start my online journey years ago when it was not as popular or in the news as it is now. Because if I waited till now to start and I was thinking about it for the last 5 years, I would have been too late. But if you're thinking about something, just start it. Like life is too short to wait for the perfect time. There's never going to be a perfect time. There's never going to be that perfect moment or that push that someone says, you need to start that now. Whatever you've been thinking about, like you said, you want to start a podcast, just start a podcast. Be you on the podcast. Talk about what you're interested in and start today, because who knows what's going to happen in the future. And the future isn't guaranteed to anyone. That's the one thing that this 2020 has taught me, is that things can happen really, really fast. And whether you're prepared or not, they're still going to happen. So you're better off doing what you want to do and not waiting than waiting for that perfect moment and then it happening and it passes you by.
You create the perfect moment by just starting.
Yeah.
And again, if you wait for the perfect moment, I always tell people it's like sitting at a bus stop where there is no bus on that route anymore. You're just going to be sitting on that bench for the rest of your life. So you got to get in the game and you got to make it happen yourself.
Yeah. Back to you said you don't go back and listen to your first podcast episode. If you start a podcast and you're on number 50 or 60 and you go back and listen to episode 1, 2, 3, and you're like, that was great. You waited way too long to get started. You should go back and listen to your first 10 and be like, oh my God, those are terrible. Because it means you started at the right time. Like you started before you were absolutely ready, and you're going to get better at it with anything over time. And, you know, my first 25 podcast episodes on Smart were a hot mess, but I don't care. I got better with it. My equipment got better. I knew more about podcasting and what I needed to use and how to interview someone, and not just interview them, but actually listen to what they're saying versus preparing my next question while they're talking and not even really paying attention and having the interview be terrible. Like, it's a conversation.
It's just two people talking. And again, anything that you do, and you get those repetitions, just like the gym. I always come back to that. You know,
Yeah.
you don't build the body that you want going to the gym once and walk out looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger. It takes time, dedication, energy, and effort. So, Bruce, before I get to my last question, how can people find out about more about you and what you do and how you help people? But more importantly, the two podcasts, what are they called, and how can people go listen to them?
So one's called the Business Marketing Podcast. If you have a local business and you're more looking for marketing for local businesses, you can check out that one. That's at thebruceirving.com. That's my website. And then we have smartpizzamarketing.com. If you're a restaurant or a pizzeria owner out there and you want to learn or listen to stories from pizza operators, you can go check out that one.
Awesome. So final question, Bruce, before we sign off, what does success truly mean to you?
I mean, success to me means you get to do what you want to do when you want to do it with who you want to do it with. Like, that's what success means to me. It doesn't mean money or stuff. As I get older, I realize that means less and less. To me, success, if you get to wake up in the morning and do what you like to do and you're happy, you're successful. Like, that to me is success. And I always tell my nieces and nephews and my own kids, like, don't go to college just to learn something that you don't even know you want to do. Like, go do that and try it out first, because you're 18 or 19 or 20 years old. You're going to live a long time doing that miserable job and waking up every morning and hating going to work. And life is too short to hate going to work. You should wake up every morning with a smile on your face and be like, you know what? I get to do whatever I want today. Even though it's work, like what we do is fun, but it's still work, but I enjoy every part of it. So it doesn't feel like work. So I would say success is waking up every single day with a smile on your face because you get to do what you want to do when you want to do it.
I could not agree more. My good friend Michelle Scaff always says, become a life architect and design it the way that you want.
Yeah,
Bruce,
and it sounds like fluffy, right? Like, it sounds like it's not attainable. But it's not easy. Like, it takes a lot of work to get to the point where you could do that. In the beginning, it's like you got to do two things at once, but it is attainable. You could totally do it. I am not a smart man, and I figured it out. So if I could figure it out, anybody can figure it out.
if it's been done once, it could be done again. And that's
100%.
the thing. You and I are living proof that, you know, you can move into the online space and you do have something of value to offer outside of teaching people how to work out and how to flip pizzas. You know, it's, you know, we have other skill sets and we have other ways to help people. So could not agree more. Bruce, so grateful for you for coming on today. I know so many people listening to this are going to get so much from this, and all the information that you left are going to be in the show notes. So I highly encourage you guys to check out Bruce and everything that he's doing. Also, if you happen to be listening to this on iTunes, definitely leave a rating and a review. Let us know what you took most away from the episode. We would love to hear from you. So Bruce, thanks again for being here today.
Scott, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So guys, again, please enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you so much again for checking out today's episode. And if you are listening through iTunes, Spotify, wherever you are, please leave me a rating and review. Let me know what you loved, what you would like to see improved, or ideas you have for future episodes. And if you are interested in taking your business to the next level, don't hesitate to go to my website, www.scottaaron.net, where you can schedule a free discovery call with me, where I can learn more about you, your business, what you're struggling with, and how we can work together. And don't forget to check out my wife, Nancy, and mine, our free community on Facebook called LinkedIn Leads for Life. We would love to see you in there. Have a great rest of your day. And thank you everyone for your support. Grateful for each and every one of you.